We're finding out. Yeah. Yeah, some people are going to Canada. Yeah. Yeah.
We'll just take a moment here. We've got some password issues. Okay, I'll call the meeting to order. And I'll ask for approval of the agenda. Sherry and Wenda, all in favor? Thank you. Any conflicts of pecuniary interest in the general nature thereof? Yes, Sherry.
I'd like to declare a conflict for the closed item.
Okay, thank you. Of the January 2nd, 2023 Stone Mills regular council meeting, can I get a mover and seconder, please? Doug and Wendy, any questions or comments on those minutes? All in favor? Carried. Thank you. So we have a delegation from the Friends of the Napanee and Salmon Rivers. We have half an hour allotted for this presentation. And who's going to go first?
I am.
That'd be Wayne Goodyear. Welcome, Wayne. You know how to run those mics?
I've been tutored. Great. Thank you very much for the invitation. It is really heartening to be here because our group is called Friends of the Napanee River, and basically we're looking on the table at friends of our rural lifestyle and our watersheds. So I may be preaching to the confirmed. Okay. I'll pause for a moment to remember Brian Brown and Wally Edwards and Deb Thompson, who all loved this community and all contributed in their own way, and they're no longer with us. Okay. We can go to the next slide, I think, the opening slide. And that was prepared by a group of highly motivated people who worked with council and with the Quinte Conservation Authority and then other agencies to find funding and got it repaired. And it'll turn out to be an important element in our flood mitigation. We are Friends of the Napanee, so you can go to the next one here. And we're dedicated to the education of our community, to both the responsibilities for this watershed and incredible benefits of this watershed. People simply do not realize how wonderful it is. I have a lot of new residents stop by when I do my yard sales. They can't believe how friendly the people are, and they can't believe the kids are swimming off the bridge in Colebrook. I guess that doesn't happen in downtown Milton. So we've got a treasure, and it's worth protecting. Okay, go to the next one. So our concern, I guess a picture or two pictures worth 2,000 words. That's where I live. That's my granddaughter swimming with me. My family, my children and my grandchildren have swum there and at Colebrook and over the falls in Yarker for 50 years without people getting ill, without any worries. That's unbelievably special, and we want to keep that for sure. We're looking at, next one, thanks. We're looking at basically, we're facing right now the reversal of 50 years of environmental protection in Ontario. Things that were put in place, regulations and agencies, and often were put in place because people had lost their lives in flooding emergencies or in the case of Walkerton, poor use of groundwater, poor planning, etc. So we're looking at a winding back of the protections, okay? If we look at that slide there, you can see that the first thing that happened to begin the winding back was the cancellation of the office of the Environmental Commissioner. The only reason that they created the office, governments created the office, was to have something to supervise the Environmental Bill of Rights. That's why it was created. It was canceled in 2018, and alarmingly, the files were also made hard to access. That's been improved now by Diane Sachs herself. All right, and we move through, and there's been cuts for flood management, and the chief mandate for the conservation authorities is flood mitigation. And yet the very measures that you can read for yourself there, they strip those authorities of many of the powers they need to actually do the job properly for flood mitigation. Those lands are held for flood mitigation so the waters can spread. That research is done to determine contaminants entering the water, where they're coming from. And those particular protections are disappearing. Go to the next one. We basically have been looking at a larger dismantling of protections for the environment, and that slide covers the fact that money has been moved from the support for renewable energies, for climate strategy plans, and for protection of endangered species, etc. And it's been moved ostensibly to accelerate building for homes. That's the decision made, to move it over to one area into another. But those are areas that could ill afford being underfunded. Show me the next one. It's a huge response to particularly Bill 23. I think that people were overwhelmed by the number of bills being passed, and 23 took a while to percolate before responses started. Those are just some of the headlines and some illustration of how widespread the opposition to some of the measures are. There's one down at the bottom that talks about 10% of homes being uninsurable. That's the Insurance Board of Canada. And they said something else pretty frightening in their report, and that is that we simply have to stop building on dangerous locations. And that's kind of vague. What do they mean by dangerous locations as an insurance company? My son's a consultant for Accenture, and he said we are probably the leading risk management company in the world, except for insurance companies, because nobody employs better hydrogeologists and climatologists, and they have to know as well as they can what's coming. And we're looking at removal of insurance on dangerous properties. So particularly our area, we have to have our bells on about that and be ready for change. And the Ontario Society of Professional Engineers did something remarkable. My best buddy's an engineer. They're generally very conservative. Their associations do not make public statements. They have stated that they will not permit their members to go to work for any company that's going to infringe upon the green belt and work in lands that should be protected. Wow, these are very conservative people. Okay, next one, please. So how does Bill 23 affect us? Well, you can scan down and see that there's the ability of the Ontario Land Tribunal to dismiss appeals and award costs. That's new. It takes the Conservation Authorities Act to permit development in areas that were previously prohibited, and they lose many of their abilities to, for example, assist in peer reviews and assist in other activities that smaller townships really needed the help from. And the last part there, those are all the acts that they are not allowed to perform reviews or comment on. They are forbidden, and so is the municipality, to request them to comment on something. So they're really attacking the conservation authorities with these bills. Next one, please. So how's it going to affect us? Well, if you look at that map, the red areas are the areas, I believe you had it earlier in your materials. Those are the areas that were formerly protected. MNR has a very, very strict rubric, very strict scoring system to identify wetlands that are significant. It is very hard to get on. It's got to have hydrogeological, it's got to be contiguous, it's got to be important to the local drainage systems, it's got to have rare or endangered species. It's amazingly hard. Most wetlands don't get on it. There used to be 101 identified, and now 99 of them have been delisted. They are no longer significant. And what does that mean? It means that they no longer have the protections that come with that designation. I'll give you a local example of what it could mean, and I'm not being alarmist at all. If you look at the largest, reddest concentration over to the right-hand side, okay? It looks like a teepee. Those are the wetlands that surround both our waste management area and the Moscow Plain. And so you have an amazing farming zone and you have a municipal site, and yet my children and grandchildren can swim in the water without becoming ill 10 to 15 miles away. How is that possible? It's because those wetlands are the lungs of the system. They clean the water, they retain the heavy chemicals, they make sure that what gets passed is detained long enough that other things can work on it. Susan may get into some of the chemistry. Okay, so they're really important and we don't have them anymore. Next one, please. Okay, every one of those items on that list, I can assure you, are items that I have seen challenged through my career. I have spent 50 years swimming and fishing and snorkeling and in this river, and the changes have been happening so rapidly in the past 10, and not changes through policy, changes mostly through invasive species, things showing up we have never seen before. Temperatures we're not seeing. It takes longer we don't see the cool down we used to see. The water warms up faster. We're seeing changes that I've not seen, and I'm a 50-year observer. Okay, so we're worried about all of those issues, and we want to work with council in any way we can to address any of those. One really important, in my opinion, is the floodplain mapping, and I know that your council's already running with that one well. The ability to model future changes is what the insurance companies already have. And if you go online, you can look at the City of Toronto that already has its modeling, and you can use the modeling on computer for the City of Toronto because they know what they're facing with so much asphalt and so many roads. Okay. Quick comment on flooding. People think it's because the rivers or the lakes come up. That's part of it. Almost as damaging and often more expensive is the overland flooding. We didn't even know this lowland flooded at all. But hyper events Suddenly farms and properties and fields that have never flooded before are flooded now, and it's staying there because it can't get back out as it recedes. So there's two kinds, riverine flooding and overland flooding. Next steps. I guess the real big ask we're coming here with is for council to create an environmental advisory committee for council. There's a great many townships have already made the move. What it does is at no cost to council. It gets information and opinions and attitudes and research done and coordination done with your community at no cost. It's a subcommittee of your council, and the makeup is outlined in the examples we've included. We put Algonquin Highlands as the example, but there are lots of different examples, and they have different compositions for who might be on their committees. I am particularly excited by, give me the next one, Christine, the fact that in the group to be involved in Algonquin is representatives from a high school, students from a high school. It's their future. And so this is an exciting concept, and we heartily support it ourselves, and we hope that you'll be able to create one of those to help in Stone Mills. And the final one, I think, yeah, that's the discussion, and the discussion sentence that I put at the end is pretty simple. I think every one of us would agree that the Napanee watershed is worth saving, so let's take the steps to protect it. Thanks for listening.
Thanks, Wayne. Susan, do you want to take over? Nicely done, Wayne. You did about half of the 30 minutes. Good timing.
Yeah. I told him to make sure and take only 15. Good evening, everyone. I'm Susan Moore, president of Friends of the Salmon River. Next slide, please. This is our fairly recent banner that we take to events, and on it you can see the size and shape of our watershed. It starts just north of Cloyne and then empties into the Bay of Quinte. It's a long one. Friends of the Salmon River has been around in the community since 2004, and we help protect the watershed and those who enjoy it. Wayne has just outlined the impacts of Bill 23 and the resulting problems, so I won't go through that again. I agree with his points. Friends of the Salmon and of the Napanee collaborate on a lot of projects. We're kind of sister organizations. And collectively, our email outreach is about 800 people. Next, please. This one's kind of self-explanatory. I think especially if we end up losing our wetlands and complexes, which we almost certainly will, and if we lose much of the assistance that we now have from Quinte Conservation, this is going to cause a huge turnaround, and there's going to be a lot to make up here and a lot of. Next, please. So just a little background on provincially significant wetlands. Wayne said a little about it, but the Ontario Wetland Evaluation System is it's a scoring system. It's a very long-standing tradition. It's based on science, and it was begun in 1982. Highly detailed, time-consuming. It's difficult to qualify as a protected wetland. And losing these designations basically equals ignoring 40 years of hard-earned data and evaluations. We don't know exactly what the new system will be like, but we do know that 2 elements have actually been removed from the rubric for significant wetlands. And with the new evaluations, they cannot consider the habitat of endangered species, and they cannot consider contiguous wetlands. So wetlands only in isolation. Both of these not good. We know there'll be much less protection of our wetlands. Next, please. You did see this, but I put the map that Quinte Conservation made up, this map for us. And yes, all the red wetlands are the ones that we, I'm sure, will be losing. There are two very tiny green ones where it says green equals no loss. There are ones in the Wyra system and ones in the Prince Edward County system. The rest are all apparently going. The blow up on the right, the blow up is of roughly the Stone Mills area. So I put that in so you get a better idea of our local impact. It looks like we're going to be faced with miles and miles of unprotected shoreline. And what result? Are we going to see filling in of wetlands? Are we going to see building on floodplains? I think this could end up kicking Stone Mills in the butt, and especially if we start to lose our good water quality and quantity. Next, please. The value of our wetlands just cannot be overstated. They're so essential for our water quality and our water regulation, that is how it flows. And wetlands do all of these services for free. Human-made structures for providing these kinds of services are weak imitations. They may not work nearly as well as real wetlands do, and they're extremely costly. So we really need our wetlands. Next, please. So our wetland complexes, this photo that you see is the Kennebec Wetland Complex, which is actually in North and Central Frontenac. It's a big chunk of the Salmon River headwaters, and actually much of the reason why the salmon system is so very healthy. And you can see, look at the size of it, 6,000 acres, gigantic and absolutely packed with high biodiversity values and very high protection of the ecological services that maintain our waterways. Interestingly enough, when it was actually scored some years ago, only about half of it was ever actually finished and scored as a PSW, simply because they ran out of funding. And so it unfortunately was never finished, but it's still an extremely high value complex. Our complexes are strongholds of services that protect our waterways. There are several complexes in the Napanee system as well. And I just want to mention the idea of headwater features. These are the many small streams and wetlands that actually occur throughout our system, not actually just in the headwaters, but everywhere, that are essential to functioning and should never be blocked or drained. Next, please. So we certainly are looking at some threats to Stone Mills Township. Look at the amount of water contained in just 1 acre, in just a 1 acre wetland, 1 million gallons of water. Huge, and we really need that storage. What about road maintenance? If we do have to endure more flooding, how in the world is Stone Mills Township we're going to be able to afford to spend even more than 45% of its budget on roads? That looks like a problem. The tax base and the tourism. We have the wetlands that we do have. Wetlands are now basically an important feature of tourism because people realize they have such high biodiversity values. And of course, the wetlands help preserve the quality of our lakes and rivers, which also helps to maintain the big tax base we have at Beaver Lake and other tax bases. In agriculture, wetlands are, of course, very valuable sources of water during drought. Also, the list of ecosystem services provided by wetlands that benefit agriculture is as long as your arm. Actually, I think I'll say as long as John's arm, because his arm is longer than mine is. Next, please. These are just references, which I wanted council to have so that you can see my presentation comes from some legitimate sources. I didn't just dream it up. And you're welcome to look up these references. Next, please. So we think it's a big benefit to have, as one solution, we think it's a big benefit to have more land protected, certainly not at the cost of anyone's private property and always respecting the property rights of citizens. Our groups would like to work with other organizations to initiate more protection. And in fact, Friends of Salmon and Friends of the Napanee are planning a webinar soon featuring the land conservancies to show people the benefits and also the process of how it works to donate land and what their options are. And I have listed on the slide several ways in which protected land helps our local economy. Tourism, remote workers, sustainable resource management, reducing the cost of funds. All of those are things that we need to maintain. Right. So how do we work together? Well, we think working locally at the municipal level is a really great option. As Wayne mentioned, we're very happy if we can to help Stone Mills and Quinte Conservation with the floodplain map. We might be able to help with the public consultation aspect. Friends of the Salmon River certainly supports the idea of an environmental advisory committee. I do want to make it clear that our two groups are certainly not intending on taking over how this committee is formed or who's on it or what its agenda is. That, of course, will be a decision for council. But we suggest it could be composed of a cross-section of people in the community, people with experience and expertise in environmental issues, a democratic process to begin discussing a direction and some options. Next, please. So we respectfully suggest that Stone Mills Council tonight receive these two deputations. And I have one wording change, by the way, in this second motion. We would like to direct staff to prepare a report that we'd like to direct staff to prepare a report regarding an environmental advisory committee, including a proposed terms of reference and a draft bylaw as appropriate. Committee, but just to make a report on it. Last slide, please. Well, that's it. Thank you very much for your time. And I'd like to open it up now to comments and discussion on both presentations.
Thank you, Susan. Could I start with a motion to receive both presentations? Doug and Sherry, all in favor? That's carried. Thank you. So, Council, any comments or questions just to start off here for either presenter? Sherry.
She's the greeter.
He was trying to be discreet and I screwed up.
Made him come in the front door.
Hi, Roger.
Okay, go ahead, Sherry.
Okay, sorry. Now I completely lost my train of thought. Okay, first of all, I want to say my property is on the Salmon River. This is so important to me, and this bill or act or whatever it is now is devastating. But I want to know, so how would this committee work, and what powers would it have? What would it accomplish?
Well, it's strictly an advisory committee.
Yeah.
So it does not really have powers per se. It's simply to inform council about various different options of what kind of work we could do to, or what kind of suggestions we could make to council to then make their own decisions on where we're going with various environmental options. It's kind of to do research.
Okay, so can I? Okay, so I'm sure you're aware, there's a portal now on our website in the counties where you can go and see all of any Planning Act applications, right? So you can follow that. What would be wrong with your own folks making a committee? And you could even have a delegation each meeting if you wanted to, and talk to all of council as opposed to just the two or whoever's on your committee.
Yeah. The main reason that this concept is catching on in so many municipalities is that it's not a group. So it's a chance to hear from people who have an interest as we do, but also people who are just regular ratepayers and young people from a high school and people who work in the field and will volunteer their time. It's just a broader base to help, and especially to help on early research into issues that are emerging. Because if you get an expensive consultant to do that, that's going to cost. If you say, well, what's the picture with road salt? What's going on with road salt? Here you have a committee made up of whatever number you decide. There's lots of patterns you can look at, and you can create your own if you want to. But it lets those folks do the basic groundbreaking work and get the materials. And here's a study we found from there. Here's something that happened here. Here's something they're reporting there. So you folks have a base of information to work from. So that's the way I see it. It's chiefly an environmental advisory. That's why it's called that committee, an advisory committee. That's its role solely, to advise on what we've been able to learn, or what also it's a bit of a hearing the tom-toms in the woods. You get to hear what your community is feeling or thinking, because each of those group people that come to that bring opinions from a town or a hamlet or an organization. Okay.
Mhm.
So it's not a bad thing to have.
So just one more thing and I'll stop. So I feel like, well, I think everybody felt behind the 8 ball with this whole thing. I feel like we should have had this conversation a year ago or more.
Mhm.
So correct me if I'm wrong. I don't know, Jason or Brian or somebody, but if there was something that, someone wanted to complain about, we can't supersede provincial law. What could we do with the information once we have it?
That's what your professional staff can help you with. Like when you get the advisory committee gives you information, let's stay with road salt, then Brian and your staff and Jason can take a look at all the aspects of application of those thoughts and say, here's the barrier we run into here. There's some room for wiggle in this area here. Okay, but they have the information and they know what the public is thinking and they know what areas are most impacted by it. And I'm just pulling the road salt issue out of the air because it's skyrocketing. I subscribe to Ontario Out of Doors, and their researchers are absolutely amazing. They connect directly to the major universities, and they thought salt disappeared quickly within 3 months of being applied. It had been diluted and gone, and it doesn't. It combines with other materials in the soils and in particular in wetlands, and the wetlands work to hold it back, but it doesn't go away. So it becomes cumulative. Just that is huge. In Europe, they actually collect it all by when they wash their highways, their super highways. They don't do anything different than we do on small ones, but on super their highways, and they collect that runoff in a catch basin. They don't let it out because they're not moving. They're a society that's been together for 500 years, so they worry about that kind of thing.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Anyone else? Rob, go ahead.
First of all, everybody, I think it's fantastic you're here. And I'm seeing some fantastic faces and people that I really care for and enjoy. I enjoy every minute of my time with you, first of all. And thank you for the fantastic presentation. I know that this is a lot of work, and a lot of work. Even just the links alone, I'm looking at it going, somebody has to spend a lot of time on this. So I want that to be very clear. Thank you. Second, this is going to sound a little contradictory to myself. When I voted in favor of the floodplain mapping, we had a conversation about that prior to the election.
Yeah.
Saw the value in it for sure. I'm an outdoorsman. I appreciate it very, very much. It's very near and dear to me. I actually worked for the NRCA back in the day before amalgamation, and that's peaceful to me. It brings peace to my heart, being outdoors. every minute. The problem I see here, and it's unfortunate, is that we're all at the mercy of this act. Just recently, I voted in favor of a committee of adjustment that contains 5 public members. That alone, we were not sure about doing that because it would slow down our process in approving certain things. But I saw the value in it. I think it's important to have public consultation and public involved in certain processes. So I worked hard to make sure that that happened. If we were to introduce something like this and have to wait any amount of time to get the information back, it may slow us down to the point where we end up losing significant revenue to the township in permit fees. And I know it can't be about money, but it has to be about money at a certain point. The taxpayer is the one that we are ultimately responsible to, and to the environment, of course. If that were not part of the issue, it might be a little different, but that will be a significant challenge. So I'm not sure how we would manage that. What would you do the fact that we're on a very strict timeline and the committee of adjustment has to do maybe as on-site and return that information to us, and you can just see the rope getting longer all the time, and poor Jason having to wait to get all this stuff done? How would you speed things up? You're speaking about experts and that sort of thing. That you can just see it, the stretch. It's not, there's no value in it. There certainly is, but we're under the crunch.
Yeah, and this kind of advisory committee, as far as I understand, is never going to be your urgency tool. It meets 4 times a year, and you would be getting reports, and those would be for the next planning cycle, okay? For the next budget cycle. It's not an urgency tool. It's a, yep, and things that are on it one year may be slightly worse the next year, okay? Or slightly better. But it lets you have 4 times a year a report that tells you how we're doing, in a lot of different things. That's never bad to know. But no, it's not the expectation that, oh, we gave you a sheet on road salt and have you passed a bylaw yet? It's not what we're talking about. Okay.
I'd also like to add too that right now in a state of a great deal of unclarity, because a lot of what's coming down from the province simply isn't known yet, how the new systems are going to work. So I think the Environmental Advisory Committee could be a big benefit in watching all of that and then making a report on, okay, here's what we have so far. The province says A, B, C, D, E. Now these are the things we're going to work on.
Yeah.
Anyone else? Crystal Lee, then Wendy. Go ahead, Crystal Lee.
Yeah, I just want to echo what Rob, thank you very much for your presentations. It's a lot of time and work. It's great to see so many people engaged and involved. I think I heard a lot during the campaign that we want more public engagement, more community involvement, and I think this is a great demonstration of an opportunity for that. Also in your work, do you perceive yourself as being reactive to, say, as Sherry was mentioning, our permits? Is this a reactive committee, or are you to be proactive in looking at the future kind of?
Information education is always basically going to be acted upon. So what you do with it, tough question, because if we're collecting information on themes and areas of interest and reporting back 4 times a year, some of those issues are certainly reactive. It's not looking any better. We did the tests. We had people come from that place and do this, and it's not looking any better. And so you're in a reactive situation. But as I said, there's not an urgency situation. It's chiefly gathering information and you folks in a format that you can access, because you can all go home and start working on road salt. Lots of luck. Phone me when you figure you've got a handle on it, because it's big and it's complex and there's different universities looking at it. And that's just one example I'm using, but there's lots of other more positive things that can be reported on. Grant structures that people don't have the time to research, and we can, and let you know that you can get a grant for that if you have wetland, and there's a grant that lets you do this. And we're out there doing the groundwork, the earliest groundwork, okay, with both your community and with the physical world. Okay.
And I'd also like to add, I think we do have to be both. I think we
Yeah.
mostly be proactive, but there are times a committee would need to be reactive because, okay, suddenly there's some new legislation coming down from the
Yeah,
province or
yeah.
wherever, and we need to help respond to that.
That makes no sense.
Okay, just give me a moment here to interject. So far, I think questions and comments have been assuming that what you're proposing is a committee that will be involved in the development application approval process. And I don't think that's what you're proposing at all. So the premise of Sherry and Rob's comments here, I think, is irrelevant. You're looking to be literally an information advisory committee that's doing research, which maybe staff won't have time to do, and comment on issues of that nature. So I don't think we need to pursue any further questions about development approval and specific proposals. I mean, they may come up as illustrative of information that you're bringing forward, but am I on the right track here?
Absolutely.
Okay. Wendy, go
We're
ahead.
not elected. We're not elected, and we respect so much the people that give their time up.
Yeah, and we've got council and committee of adjustment to rule on development applications, but this would be a supplementary
Right.
contextual kind of input.
An advisory committee.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Purely
Volunteers.
Okay, sorry. Go ahead, Wendy.
So I just wanted to ask a question in regards to, we're looking at Salmon River. It's a very long river. Have other townships involved. Napanee, how is the town of Greater Napanee handling such issues? Do they have an environmental advisory group? Would we be able to consult with their group? Does Central Frontenac maybe have a group that we could also, consult? I just want to see the whole picture, and can we draw in other groups and other?
That's you mean like conservation authorities do?
Yeah.
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 I don't know. I mean, this idea is as new to us as it is now to you. We're excited by it. There's lots of examples, and from what the ones I've checked, there's quite a variability in how they make their committees up and how they write their purposes and what they want them doing. So I don't know.
Napanee?
Not
No,
yet, but
you're
actually,
first. Yeah.
yeah.
That is a
Yeah,
plan?
you guys are first.
Okay.
And both groups have plans to present in Greater Napanee as well. And Friends of the Salmon also has plans to present in our other municipalities, because we actually have 5 of them. So
And what
it
about
will be
Central
suggested.
Frontenac? Do you have some members from that area? Like, do you
Oh,
right
yeah.
now?
Friends of Salmon does have, because that is part of our watershed. So we do have
So you're-
members
You're
there,
covering the river pretty good, is what I,
right?
or the
Yes,
county.
because it's North and Central Frontenac and Stone Mills and Greater Napanee and Tyndonega
Right.
for the
And
Salmon
then
River.
we go right into Hastings. Look at how big we can get. Look at this huge. Eh?
Okay,
you.
thanks, Wendy. So I saw Wenda and then Doug, you wanted to speak as well. Go ahead, Wenda.
So through you, thank you very much again for coming and providing us with this interesting concept. I read most of the links that you provided, and I found it really interesting that the other environmental advisory committees have, there's a great variety of their focus. Like one was really focused on recycling and waste management. Another one was really focused on water quality. And I like what you're focusing on so much because of the limitations now to to the conservation authorities in general. And there's a big black hole there that needs to be filled. And if you can fill it with experts and people who are very knowledgeable to support staff in some of their decisions, I think that's a really good idea. I did look, though, at the collaborative element that Wendy was talking to, and some of the townships or municipalities, some of them were just towns, some of them were counties, and et cetera. They do collaborate with outlying other municipalities, and they write that right in their terms of reference, citing who they're going to be collaborating with. So that might be something you consider when you're nailing down everything. I really appreciate the hard work that you've done. I really like the variety of the potential for the types of committees that the structure of the committee. I found it interesting that way more than 50% do not have staff on the committee. As a matter of fact, one said in their terms of reference, a statement, no employees. And no was in big bold letters. And I thought, well, that's an interesting way to look at things. Yes, there's a lot of wiggle room here for taking workload off staff and, giving volunteers with the expertise and skill and opportunity to sit down at a table and provide us with some valuable information, because staff and council, we don't really have the time, and we certainly don't have the expertise to, review all of these documents in depth the way a volunteer group would do that. So I think we're heading in a really positive direction. We are meeting with MPP Breeze, and I'm not sure exactly how that meeting is going to go and how much information we can glean from him on that, but it might hopefully give a better direction to where we would like to see this committee, should we make that decision. Focus your attentions and areas that you can't really look at because it's a done deal and it's not anything we can have an impact on. So I'd like to wait until we meet with him to get a little more broad or well-rounded understanding of what the limitations might be going forward for something like this.
Okay. Doug?
Yeah, I'd like to just talk a little bit about this. First of all, thank you. I read over everything that you had here, most of which we already knew, all of us. We just had to think about it. I found very few things that I could find fault with. I agreed with almost 100% of what I read. My background is I'm a strong supporter of conservation authorities and extremely disappointed in what has happened to conservation authorities. And I'll just give a little bit of an example of my knowledge in that. The village where I live, the area that I'm most knowledgeable about is the Napanee system. In the village of Yarker, and we'll use the term downtown Yarker, when I was a child, used to flood. And I mean flood right up over the county road. Around the bank corner, the back of the houses, where the park is today, underneath the railway bridge, it flooded on both sides of the river and over the county road. That stopped because of the Conservation Authority building dams on the depot system and controlling the water flows in the springs. We no longer had ice dams and that sort of things that we used to have at the bridge. We can look at Western Ontario, Grand River and areas and see where routinely every year properties are ruined because they're built in the floodplain, because nobody would listen to conservation authorities at that time. It's just, I don't understand the rationale of the thinking. I'm very supportive of this type of committee, and I'll tell you why. I've belonged to a number of Friends committees or been associated with them. And Friends committees or committees, volunteer committees, have a way of attracting some very strong knowledge, people with wide range of information. And worst of all, they work free. They don't charge. Okay. And they're people who are busy are not afraid to volunteer their time. So they will put into a lot of effort in something that they care about. I personally support the concept of this committee. I think it's up to us to draft the mandate so that it works properly for us and doesn't be perceived as interfering in the wrong places. But I think this committee could do a lot for us, and I'd like us at the very least to at least go away and consider with this and bring it back to us for another thought. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Doug. Wenda?
Would make a motion to that.
Got a mover? Got a seconder? Doug? So the motion would be?
It's sort of, I think it was in your presentation. The last, yes, okay.
Give consideration going away how we could form it.
Staff
Yep.
to prepare a report regarding environmental advisory committee, including proposed terms of reference and draft bylaws as appropriate. So I'm comfortable with that, with the wording of that.
Okay, are you comfortable with that, Doug?
Yes, I am.
Yeah. Any further discussion? Okay, then I would like to just get some clarification on a few things, and maybe it's not possible. I'd like Jason to comment. Susan, maybe I'm being a bit nitpicky, but you did mention there's a risk of having development in floodplains as a result of Bill 23. I don't think that's the case, but I'd like to hear what Jason thinks. If there's anything in, I guess it's an act now, not a bill, that would force us to approve any construction in floodplains. Because I think that's the one thing conservation authorities are still left with and are able to do.
Thanks, Rob. Thank you, Reeve Wise. You're correct in the fact that conservation authorities, even with the newest changes through Bill 23, still remain all oversight respecting natural hazards, including flooding, unstable soils, bedrock, karst topography, erosion, and dynamic beaches. It's all within their portfolio and their core mandate, which is what the province has provided direction on and incorporated that to be still within their jurisdiction.
Okay, that's important to clarify. And I guess the other thing I'm wondering about is the provincially significant wetlands. How are you proceeding at the moment? I know our official plan, they're still all designated in the official plan. And I'm not disputing that this act, if interpreted under its specific guidelines, would de-designate almost all of them in Quinny's watershed. But on the ground at the moment, how are you dealing with development applications that are within the setbacks that we have been enforcing?
Through you, Reeve Wise, it's always been, I'll just start a little bit before the direct answer to that question. It's always been a bit of a nuance as to who makes the determination as to whether environmental mitigation measures or environmental impact studies, for example, are required for a development application. And I say that because the conservation authorities often provided that environmental lens to development applications. However, our policy sets in our official plans at the county level, the local level, and in our zoning bylaws contained rigor and regulation for that type of development. So for example, our official plan that's currently in effect requires an environmental impact study for any development within 120 meters of a provincially significant wetland. It requires an environmental impact study within 50 meters of a locally significant or an unevaluated wetland. And all of that remains applicable and in effect today. Yes, you saw in the presentation provided that there's been some potential changes with respect to provincially PSW, provincially significant wetlands, and promoting, if you will, from a terminology perspective, to a different classification. And I was copied on correspondence from Mr. Goodyear that was provided from Quinny Conservation. However, we at the municipal level have not received any of that. To date, I've never received correspondence or communications from Conservation Authority speaking to the demotion, if you will, of wetlands. The number of 101 to 1, losing 100 provincially significant wetlands, that's alarming. I fully agree. And the policy set and the legislation that's been passed may very well be setting that up to occur. However, I've not seen any legislation that brings that into effect in our local area. We've not had that communication from Brad McNevin and his team. So in my opinion, if you asked me if I can build a dwelling next to a provincially significant wetland within 120 meters today, you ought to justify that through the completion of an environmental impact study, because we still have regulation and mapping, et cetera, that requires that. I don't have a legal opinion yet from Mr. Tony Fleming, nor do we have anything on the books, if you will, from Quinte Conservation that speaks anything other than status quo in terms of development approval process at this time. Keep in mind, this legislation came into effect received royal assent on November 28th, 2022. We're not, 2 months into this term. The Conservation Authority, as I understand, received a letter from the Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry on December 28th, speaking to policy that was taking effect January 1. Everybody was on holidays on December 28th, and the policy and the legislation did take effect. A component of that legislation, January 1, specifically hydrogeology and environmental impact study peer review, and that's a later agenda item for us tonight. All that being said, that was 16 days ago. We're moving at astronomical speeds in terms of what these changes mean on the ground and what legislation changes shall occur to bring that into fruition. So I put that out there for the members of the public and my colleagues sitting beside me and council to say, it would be my advice that we not make any rash recommendation or decision this evening, because we are less than 2 months into understanding what the new regime may be from a policy perspective from the province. Thanks.
Thank you, Jason. Any further discussion before I call a vote? Crystal?
I just wanted to add the idea of POSIC. I know we don't know fully what Bill 23 means and how it will be implemented, but I also see the positive aspect that we've identified in our official plan, like climate change is a necessity to be able to have proactive advice ongoing by a group of people who are committed, involved, and informed. I think that just is another addition that could be beneficial to us in terms of that's not Bill 23, but that is still kind of about receiving advice on how we can handle future issues.
Anyone else? Okay, I'll call the question. All in favor? That's carried. Thank you very much for your presentation.
And the room clears.
Okay, we'll carry on. Item 6, bylaws and resolutions, Stone Mills Township Committee of Adjustment procedural bylaw. This is bylaw that isn't numbered yet, being a bylaw to govern the proceedings of the Township of Stone Mills Committee of Adjustment, to be read a first, second time and passed with the third reading on January 16th, 2023. Is Jason going to address this one? Yeah, we'll just wait until the room's cleared a bit here. Okay, you ready to tackle the Committee of Adjustment bylaw, Jason?
Thank you, Reeve Wise. This is really following up on our previous meetings with respect to the Committee of Adjustment and the composition of such. The bylaw was a procedural bylaw, 6A and 6B. I don't know if I'm just speaking to A or B. I missed the intro. It really, as mentioned previously, there was specific inclusion with respect to the meeting date and time, and as to when those shall occur, as opposed to flexibility and moving a date and a time around. So you'll see, for example, in Schedule A of the first draft bylaw that's been modified. There's also been some housekeeping amendments, if you will, with respect to may permit applicants to participate electronically, just based on what we've seen in the past couple of years and the successes of that. So that's all been incorporated in a revised bylaw before you. But there's been no substantial overhaul, if you will, to the previous bylaw in which this seeks to repeal. Happy to answer any questions. Sorry.
Any questions? Wanda, go ahead.
Yes, Jason, item 12.3. So under presentations, it says the chairperson shall provide the presenter with sufficient time to present all comments or concerns relating to the application. Do we want to qualify that a term sufficient time? For example, the delegations and presentations that we have here at council, you know, they're given 15 minutes or they're given 3 minutes or whatever. Do you see any benefit in qualifying that term sufficient time to be, you know, no longer than 5 minutes or something like that? Do you see any reason to add sort of a time limit to it?
Through you, Reeve Wise. Thanks for the question, Councillor Lon. I don't. I specifically believe that the vagueness of this is appropriate for the Committee of Adjustment context. And I say that because it's often you receive very different presentations from different members of the public and applicants. So you may, for example, on an application be having a applicant-led proposal where it's a homeowner seeking a minor variance for a water setback. And another application, for example, might be led by an architect who will have great drawings and detail on a screen that can often surpass the time frame that you know, another applicant may use. I also think that to the discretion of the chair, there's opportunity to provide further, not enough provided on the onset. And often in my experience here, there has been historically a lot of reliance on staff on clarifying and providing an overview, even in addition to an applicant providing their overview. So I really think that the vagueness allows the opportunity for the chairperson to mediate the meeting in a sufficient way. Thanks.
Anything further?
Move it.
Can I get a mover then? Doug and Sherry, all in favor? That's carried. Thank you. And further to the same subject, item B under this section is bylaw, being a bylaw to appoint members to the Committee of Adjustment. I guess that's self-explanatory. Jason?
Yes, Schedule A, Reeve Wise, and the rest of council for that matter, just includes the name by name, the 5 members that are currently making up the Committee of Adjustment in Stone Mills Township, and they've expressed interest in returning, so they've been incorporated within Schedule A.
Any discussion on that? Sorry, any discussion on that? Wenda?
Sorry, Jason, just clarification on the second paragraph. It says, members of the committee who are not members of a municipal council shall hold office for the term of council that appointed them, and members of the committee who are members of a municipal council shall be appointed annually. I think I've forgotten, have we decided to add a member of council to the Committee of Adjustments?
Through you, Reeve Wise. No, Councillor Lalonde, you're correct in the fact that this is a 5-member committee comprised entirely of members of the public, not council. This is a section copied from the Act. So it's just a section 44.3 copy that allows municipalities that flexibility should they choose to use a subset of council and or the entirety. So that's why the wording speaks to public and or elected officials.
Okay, so that's just a permissive clause. Should we want to change the structure of the committee? Anything further? Can I get a mover and seconder for this bylaw? Wenda and Krista Lee, all in favor? Carried. Thank you. 8, staff reports. Jason, you're on again. Council report on changes due to Bill 23 peer review services. And the recommended motion is that council receives the report entitled Legislative and Regulation Changes Affecting Conservation Authorities, and further that council staff's recommendation to enter into an agreement for professional services with Melrose Engineering Incorporated to complete peer review work as it relates to hydrogeological assessments in support of Planning Act applications. Jason.
Thank you. Exhibit A, which is attached to this staff report, is the letter in which I made reference to in my previous conversation, provided from the ministry on December 28th, that made changes to our conservation authority, specifically Quinte, Conservation Authority effective January 1. Hydrogeological assessments and environmental impact studies are no longer able to be peer reviewed by our counterparts at Quinte Conservation. For that reason, staff are requesting council support in utilizing the services of Melrose Engineering for the hydrogeology component of the peer review, which was typically done and completed by Mark Boone at Quinte Conservation. The rationale behind the usage of Melrose Engineering is one that we share with multiple neighboring municipalities, all of the Frontenacs, so south, central, north, and the islands in Frontenac County's umbrella, as well as town of Greater Napanee, currently utilize Melrose Engineering for their hydrogeology services. And the typically at Melrose has a very good working relationship with our legal counsel and has experiences at the Ontario Land Tribunal through his guidance. For that reason, we are seeking the involvement of their services. There is no budgetary impact on us as a municipality. That being said, there is a budgetary impact on an applicant. Typically, a conservation authority was charging $750 to $1,000 to peer review a hydro-G study. I've not yet completed one through this process with Melrose. However, I expect it to be probably 2 to 3 times that much money. But again, it's 100% recharged to or charged to the applicant, given our current fee structure, and it's a legal impediment, I guess, for lack of a better term, that the Conservation Authority continue to proceed in the way we've historically proceeded. So I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Jason? So this is maybe a political question, and I won't pin you down on it, but the premise of the Bill 23, which is more homes built faster or something to that effect. Every act seems to have a catchy title these days. Wouldn't an increase in a significant increase in an application for development fee tend to inhibit development? I'm just throwing that out there. So I guess that was a rhetorical question. Well, that's true. Yeah, Brian's pointing out if it doesn't happen fast enough, it could be free because there's a clawback of fees if we don't act quickly. It's quite a morass.
Which is
Yeah, go ahead, Doug.
which is a real concern for us, I think, because what does that actually mean? If the developer can call back the fees, who's paying the bill? It's us. It's us. Okay, so it's not free if we don't get it done in the time. Yep.
Exactly. Yes, Jason.
This is for information purposes, just to that topic specifically, and my previous comment with respect to how fast things appear to be changing in the landscape of development approvals. When Bill 109, which was the bill in which the fee clawback component was included, it was said to take effect January 1, 2023. We received correspondence, I believe it was early or late December, that said that wasn't occurring anymore. It has been postponed to July 1, 2023. So we saved 6 months of time just in that fee clawback component. Just and I'll just share that for information's sake, because I probably last told you that it was going to be taking effect January 1. So that's now been amended.
Okay, so we await further developments there. Sorry, did I get a mover for that one, Brian? Can I get a mover and seconder if there's no more discussion? Yes, Doug and Sherry, all in favor? Carried, thank you. Yeah, Doug.
Just 2 minutes information. I know I'm going to, and Crystal Lee, we're going to Roma. We may have an opportunity to talk to the ministers. There's normally an opportunity after the ministers speak, sometimes if we can find which room they're in. So we may well be able to share our concerns about some of this issue, along with the opportunity that is coming in the future for us to talk to Rick. Now, our MPP, when he was the warden of the county and the mayor of Royalist, who did not support this stuff. So hopefully we can, that position is still the same going forward, that we can put as much pressure on as we can, that we're not Toronto and we're in a different situation in the rural area, because I'm almost convinced that this is another one of those lovely one meal or one piece covers everybody, and it doesn't fit. Somebody in Toronto thought this would cover people in north of Tamworth. It doesn't work. Yeah, so they need maybe Steve Clark. If we can get talking to him, we may have some success. He seems to be quite a reasonable person in the past to talk to. Thank you.
Okay. Christina, the floor is yours. Accounts payable, December 22. The Council for the Township of Stone Mills approved the accounts payable reports for the month of December. Any comment, anything to highlight?
I don't have anything to highlight at this time.
Okay, thank you. Can I get a mover? Wenda and Rob, all in favor? It's carried, thank you. Manager of Public Works and Emergency Services Thompson, use of snow fence report. Jeff.
Thank you, Reeve Wise. I apologize I wasn't here in the January 2nd meeting, or I could have answered the questions probably without a report. But so if anyone has questions now, I'm here.
Any questions for Jeff? This was something Rob.
Assuming everyone read the report.
Yes, I think we've all read your report is brief and to the point. Go ahead, Rob.
Through you, John. Sorry, Jeff.
Anything further? Yes, Wenda.
Mr. Thompson, you've highlighted the challenges very well. I'm assuming you're saying that you don't recommend that we do this. Is that correct?
There's still discussion at the county level. So
Good.
it's because it's a county road, most of the problem areas. I strongly agree with screening, like permanent screening, but installing snow fence, I haven't done it in my lifetime of 25 some years.
So you would, when you're at the meeting, you would be supporting the screening?
Planting, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm glad to
As
hear
long
that.
as it's in the right location and it doesn't shade the road, it's got to be in the right spot.
I'm glad to
right
hear
condition.
that. Thank you.
I think the big that much space to plant screening. I mean, if it's real rough pasture or something, maybe, but it's a tough one.
That's right.
Anyway, can I get a motion to receive that report? Sherry and Crystal Lee, all in favor? It's carried. Thanks, Jeff. And you've got another one, agreement for storage of antique fire truck. Yeah.
Your Worship, I made an assumption by putting this on the agenda underneath of Jeff's name. It's actually in respects to the deputy fire chief. Previously on our tour, council members were shown the antique fire truck that we have in Yarker. Earlier this year, we were also required to put an evaluation on that for replacement value. And given that the replacement value is very minimal in the sense that you can't replace it, it's got very small insurance value on it. It's taking up a valuable space inside of our operations. This agreement here, Fire Rain, which is a local contractor of a fire product, has agreed to store the antique fire truck, just asking us to sign an agreement and a waiver that they're not responsible should anything happen to it on their property as a result of fire damage or otherwise. So it's under the same risk as being part of our facility, but they're just from liability and acknowledges. The reason that this is at council is to make sure the council's aware of where it's being stored in case something in this vehicle is the result of a spontaneous combustion somewhere else and we're part of some sort of claim in that manner. So that's why it's before council, Your Worship.
Okay, we've got a motion. The council direct CAO Brooks to execute the agreement and waiver of liability for storage of the antique fire pumper truck on the Fire Rain Incorporated property as identified in the waiver agreement. Can I get a mover? Doug?
I'm not moving it. I'm making a comment
Okay.
first. Okay. Do we not have a location that we can store this? And I'm going to be very sentimental about this. First of all, I'm the reason that truck sits where it is today. That is the first fire truck that was ever in this township. It was the first fire truck in Yarker, bought-in fire truck, not a homemade one. He came from the city of York. It was drove down number 2 highway at a top speed of 25 miles an hour. And it fought fires for years in Yarker. Eventually, because of lack of money, the old Yarker Fire Department sold that to the owners of Cleland and Flindle Dry Cleaning in Kingston. They eventually changed ownerships of it to Kingston Township. And that amalgamation, Kingston Township became Kingston City, and they found that they had Kingston City's original pumper and Pittsburgh Township's original pumper and this Kingston Township's original plus this 1923 Aaron's. Okay. So they didn't know what to do with all of their antique trucks. So in the negotiation with one of the captains in there, the truck was returned to us. We had to purchase, and the deal was that the truck went to the ship of Stone Mills. And the trailer that it sits on is owned by the Firemen's Association in New York. They paid $2,500 for it. And but if we take that truck and bury it in Napanee, I don't know what the use of us having it for. We'll never use it again. We'll never see it. I just find it strange that we can't find space for that in our own municipality, in our one of our fire halls. I mean, we've got a fire hall that's a 5.5 bay fire hall. It's not full of trucks to my knowledge, but that's just my concern. I really not in favor of leaving the township.
Any further discussion? Yeah, Rob, go ahead.
Would it be something that we could take advantage of this fact that we have a space for it now and then contemplate other possibilities later? I know it is using up valuable space. I get your sentimentality big time. I go to my place and check out my garage, but it would be, pardon me? I was starting to think that way actually. But if we already have that opportunity and we know where it is, then we have some time then to think about where we could put it after.
I guess what I'm saying, because although the comment is it may not have much of insurance, but I'll guarantee it's got a resale value. I know for a fact that the tires around there are $500 a piece. And I know they want to buy them right now. So that vintage of stuff and that truck is very hard to come by. And that truck still runs. I'm not saying we never play fire, but it's a pretty truck now. But
Anything further? Jeff?
Through your worship, just to reiterate, some of the employees from with Fire Rain are on the Yarker station, so that's how it became going to Fire Rain. Some of the members are employed there, but we did have plans to put it in the Aaronsville yard 2 years ago, but then during COVID, we ended up using that building, and right now there's 2 empty bays, I think, in the Aaronsville building. But we have at least Ontario Hydro as well right now. It was their idea. Yeah.
I haven't been in the fire department since '96.
Yes, Brian. Oh, sorry, Doug wasn't using his mic. Sorry. Yeah. Okay. We've got to make a decision on this one. So does someone want to move the recommendation or make an alternative one? Yes, Wendy.
Oh, yes, I'll move the recommendation.
Get a seconder for that. Rob? All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Chief Building Official Detler, update of development services activity for 2022. It's an interesting report. Jake, do you want to touch on it?
Yeah, this is, thank you, Your Worship. This is a report that you'd normally take to council in January to kind of sum up the year's events previous, and obviously as time has gone on the last couple of years, values have certainly gone up. We've had an incredible 2021 in the planning department, and 2022 was kind of the building department's year to have a good year. Definitely values like, 30 plus million in construction permits issued and stuff like that is definitely something that I think I did a year here when I was the CBO, when we did like maybe 5 or 7 million only. So, and obviously inflation is something that causes that. The price of building a house is significantly more expensive than it was 10 years ago. That's for sure. But yeah, this is a report, and kind of went over a lot of the numbers in the planning and building department in 2022 and kind of compared that to 2021. Just wondering if anybody had any comments or questions.
Any comments or questions for Jake on that report? Seeing none, can I get a motion to receive that report? Crystal Lee and Wendy, all in favor? Carrie, thank you. You've got another item here, Jake, request for support for a funding application, Paddle It Forward.
Yes, so I have actually 2 requests to endorse or sponsor a grant application. And like I said, I've had to do this in the past with Lions clubs who actually aren't a registered charity. But yeah, now this is what used to be called the Napanee Foundation. I guess it's now called the Lennox and Addington Community Foundation. And yeah, she's hoping to use us as a sponsor because we are a municipality and do qualify for the grant application to basically try to get more equipment and try to find more staff to help her next year and train staff.
Right. Any discussion on that one? You moving it, Doug? Yeah.
But this is something that we routinely do to help out groups, is funnel applications through us. And if it works to their advantage, more power to them. I'll move it.
And you're seconding that, Sherry? Any further discussion? All in favor? That's carried. And what's the one for Quinte Conservation application for funding, Jake?
Yes, sir, your worship. Yeah, this is an application going to, that would be TD as in Toronto Dominion's Friends of the Environment Foundation. Actually, Susan Moore, I'm not even sure if she even realized this. Yeah, she has like some pretty expansive plans for what she wants to do in the Beaver Lake Park. I've explained to all parties that we actually don't own that. It's the MNRF. They were satisfied with us leasing it, that, us endorsing it would be allowable as per the grant application rules. Yeah, they're just, again, hoping for a signature from the township to endorse this application to, like I said, TD's Friends of the Environment Foundation. So,
Right. So it'll be up to them to decide if it's a leased property still qualifies, but there's nothing stopping us from endorsing the application. Sherry's moving that. Wenda's seconding that. Any further discussion? All in favor? It's carried. Thank you. Thanks, Jake. It appears we've covered the business of the open session, Brian. So I need oh, right. Yeah. Don't want to forget that. New business and statements from members. Anyone? Yes, Crystal Lee.
I just wanted to mention the passing of a long-term serving Quinte West councillor, Terry. He passed away 23 years on council in Quinte West. I got the opportunity to volunteer with him during my maternity leave in the last year and a half. I was just wondering, could we send a letter of condolences as a council?
If council so wishes, I see no reason why not. What's Terry's last name?
In my mind right now, but he's married to Joanne Belanger, Terry Richardson.
Okay. All right. Can I get a seconder for that? Doug seconding. All in favor? That's carried. Thank you, Crystal Lee. Anyone else? Any new business? Brian? Go ahead.
Your worship, it was not included in this evening's budget for council members. We have 2 things. One, I'll be looking with the procedural bylaw panel, the group that was assigned to review that. We'll be looking into next week to do that review. I'm hoping to secure that at the end of the meeting. Secondly, we'll be looking for dedication outside of our present council schedule to review the budget. So senior management team's likely to have a finalized first draft to start the process by the end of this week. I'm looking to meet with the Reeve just to discuss kind of priorities and first review and get an update and some direction just as a general parameter as to how he wishes to guide that process and has a senior management team present to council. I suspect that planning will come at the end of this week. We do gain a week inside of January with an additional Monday. There's a possibility of just trying to stay on that schedule or find some other alternative measure if we can try to keep our nights open until we get those budget meetings scheduled.
Okay.
It'll come out relatively short, Councillor Davison, relatively shortly. I just haven't conversed with the senior management team. It is also fire training night, so I just want to make sure if availability we can make that work. But it'll likely be the week that, like the next week of when our normal schedule meeting would have happened. It'll just be a matter of availability.
Okay, anything further? Statements from members, new business? Seeing none, we will be going into a closed session meeting. Are we going to adjourn this meeting first, Brian? Then I need a procedural bylaw. Move as procedural bylaw. Can I get a mover and seconder? Sherry and Doug, all in favor? And motion to adjourn then, please. Wendy and Crystal Lee, all in favor. That's carried. Thank you. Take 5.